All right, I'm gonna start. So, well, thank everyone to be here today. And I know it's a weekday and it's dinner time, so really appreciate you taking time to join us for a fantastic talk tonight. So before we get started, I actually want to talk a little bit about who HISTA is and what do we do, and a brief history of it. So as you all know, so what is really, you're here for the HISTA event. So HISTA is actually a nonprofit organization founded in 1999. So we are one of the oldest and hopefully largest influential nonprofit organizations that really focus on empowering Chinese American entrepreneurs and tech leaders. So we have registered users, about 10,000 users, and we also have been working with hundreds of partners in our network. So our network total, we reach about 50,000 members. Next slide, please. So we have, since we started in the 90s, we actually have a very broad variety of different members. Many of them are household names. So including Jack Ma, Jerry Yan, Robin Lee, and a few more. So as you can see, this is a quote we took from Jack and Jerry and Robin, what they say about HISTA. So actually one of the most well-known events that we cultivated was Jack and Jerry, the acquisition of investment of Yahoo into Alibaba happened at HISTA event at Pepper Beach. So one of the HISTA annual conference. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we were known for is that we have a few, we call it product or solutions. One is that HISTA is really known for our annual conference. So once a year we hold a conference, and this is probably one of the better known Chinese American tech entrepreneur get together. And I can see many of you in the audience have some familiar names and know that you've been to HISTA events. So we haven't done this lately because during pandemic, we put this on pause for about 3 years. The good news is that actually this year, either in late September or early October, we're gonna restart HISTA annual conference, and it will be great to see all of you joining us. The second product or solution we call is HISTA Talk. During pandemic, we continue to have more Zoom-based HISTA talks. We have invited a number of leaders in the industry to share their insight. And then we have education seminars, and we have Founders Club. Next slide, please. To give you an idea that what kind of caliber that we have at the HISTA Talk, and then you can see that we have founders on Zoom. We have a public company, newly IPO companies such as Subtong, Agora, Dial, which is the company that provide technology behind Clubhouse. We have founders, William, Graysell is also another newly IPO company. And we have some household name companies, for example, Rotten Tomato, we all know for movie rating. And then we have, Deborah Liu, who's a ABC and grew up here, and she's CEO Ancestry, the upcoming the leaders in tech and women on boards. And then we have startups founders, for example, Vu, who is a Series C company now for ALSA Corp. And then we have StarX Med founder, Andrew Lee, and then we have ID by DNA, who are one of the early companies to provide COVID tests during pandemic. Next slide, please. So today, it's our pleasure that we have two fantastic speakers joining us. So we have Greg Tanaka, and then we have Brian Wong joining us. So a little bit about the background of the two audience. So Greg is currently Palo Alto City Council member since January 2017. And he's currently running for US congressional candidate for Silicon Valley's Congressional District 16. And we're actually going to have a fantastic little short video about him shortly after. But the highlight is Greg was born in LA, and he has raised in a single parent household who went on to attend California Institute of Tech and University of California, Berkeley. So he has been an entrepreneur. He's a father and is devoted to public servant. And someone with experience necessary for company leadership and outside the perspective central to innovative policy solutions. So, and this talk is gonna be moderated by Brian Wong. Brian is a dear friend, a longtime friend from Alibaba, and he was a former group vice president of Alibaba Group, and currently founder and chairman of Radii Media Group and managing director of C-Clip Partners Limited. So Brian is a Chinese-American entrepreneur and investor, and he was the first American and only number 52 employee joining Alibaba Group, where he contributed to the company's early globalization efforts and served as Jack Ma's special assistant for international affairs. So he founded at Alibaba, he founded Alibaba Global Initiative Group. And also he has a new book coming out called The Tao of Alibaba, to be published in fall of 2022. Well, that's a highlight of Brian. And one more thing I want to add to it is that he is recognized as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum and currently is a member of the Committee 100. So with that, we're gonna watch a short video. Monk, please publish the video. Okay, there you go.
An alcoholic. I spent my childhood running away. Where I am from, you're not supposed to run for Congress. At the age of 6, my dad was imprisoned in a World War II Japanese internment camp. He became a high school dropout and an alcoholic. I spent my childhood running away from domestic violence in a neighborhood where trying to sleep to the sound of gunshots was the norm. Growing up, I learned what struggle meant, but I also learned to see opportunity. My name is Lynn Tanaka. I was born, raised, and educated in California, a proud Bay Area citizen for 3 decades. I started tech companies and served the people of Palo Alto through the depth of the pandemic while on city council. Now I'm running for Congress to keep that opportunity alive here in Silicon Valley. Today, the money in your pocket buys your family less healthcare, less education, less housing, and less food. At the same time, crime is increasing.
Robbed at gunpoint in front of his own Palo Alto home.
And there's no plan for the historic California drought. Innovation is leaving our district, and it's taking opportunities with it. It's clearer than ever that we no longer have anyone fighting for us in Congress. To the rest of the world, Silicon Valley represents the future, but our current incumbent is stuck in the past. An 80-year-old incumbent who is too busy raising prescription prices while raking in big pharma money. An incumbent beholden to deep-pocket lobbyists instead of the people. This is costing us dearly. You deserve innovation, not inflation, jobs, not crime, and housing, not homelessness. We need healthcare competition that lowers your bills, education that sets your children up for success, and immediate action on climate change. For that to happen, something needs to change. We need policies that embrace the future and will once again make us the innovation capital of the world. We need a legislator for the digital age. This election, cast your vote for the future. An innovative Silicon Valley can grow the pie so that everyone benefits. Vote for Lynn Tanaka by June 7th.
Love it. This is a great short, by the way. Really, really, really great. With that, I'm gonna pass the mic.
Get exactly what you want on Wayfair.
Cute table. Kelly Clarkson.
Like a multifunctional find that.
Okay,
All right.
Commercial. We need to insert the right commercial for your campaign.
Hey, thanks, Di, for the fantastic introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for this event. My name is Brian, as Lake mentioned. I'm your moderator for today. And we're very excited that you could all join us for what will be an informative and exciting conversation with Greg Lynn Tanaka, a serial entrepreneur, Palo Alto City Councilman, and legislator for the digital age. Also, just want to thank Lake, Dan, and Heista for organizing today's event. As a side note, Lake and I go all the way back to 2000 when we were young and energetic, sort of tech enthusiasts. We were desk mates in the outskirts of Hangzhou in a makeshift small office for a Chinese startup called Alibaba. And as she mentioned, Heista was actually quite pivotal in helping to take Alibaba to a new level by bringing together Jerry and Jack after many years, and they agreed on a milestone deal with Yahoo and Alibaba. So really happy to be back joining forces with Lake. And I see a lot of old friends from the work days and even some mentors who are on this call. I see Henry Wong in the group and Annie Lee from our days at Alibaba. So, today we're going to have sharing from Greg. Greg is a unique candidate. I met him last year in Palo Alto when I was back in town where my parents are still resided at an anti-Asian hate crime rally. I was so impressed with Greg's passion and thoughtfulness on many of the key issues that we're all facing as Americans, particularly from the Bay Area. The technology arena with a focus on Web3, and Greg talks about the need to promote innovation in a time when technology can really help address many of the problems that we're facing, whether it be climate change, job creation, and just getting the economy going through promoting more entrepreneurship and helping small businesses to become resilient and also really embrace this technology to help them during this difficult time. There's also the racial politics that we're facing with regard to the anti-Asian hate crimes. I think many of us, being of Chinese ancestry or heritage, are very concerned about this. And given the fact that Asian Americans constitute 30% of the population in places like the Bay Area and San Francisco, but also have an outsized contribution to the industries. Many of you are tech entrepreneurs, tech leaders in your companies, and we contribute a significant amount to the productivity and value creation in the local economy. It's critical that we have someone who represents the needs and can protect everyone, regardless of their race or cultural heritage. And so in short, I think Greg is in what I say is an accidental politician. He's a serial entrepreneur, but then stumbled into this political activism because he cares so much about the issues facing Silicon Valley today. And for me, as a Bay Area native, a third generation Chinese American, someone who witnessed the benefits of technology and how it can contribute to building a more inclusive society, I think it's critical to have political leaders who can represent the views that we care deeply about and find solutions to the myriad of challenges that we're facing as a community. I'm actually dialing in or calling in from Shanghai. And you might be asking, well, why is Brian involved in a local political campaign to support a candidate all the way from Shanghai? Well, number one, as I said, as an American, and two, as someone who grew up in the Bay Area, and three, I think that Silicon Valley in its influence and impact has such an important role to play that I'm doing whatever I can in my capacity to support important candidates like Greg. So with that, I'm going to pass the microphone to Greg Lynn Tanaka, and he's going to share with us some of his positions and views on the issues that we just mentioned. So I'll Take it away, Greg.
Okay, thank you, Brian. First, thank you, Heista, Lake, all the people on this call tonight. I know it's dinner time, so really appreciate you guys attending. Really appreciate it. I see some friends in the audience. I think it's amazing that you guys are attending. The video kind of gives a little background on myself, so I don't think I need to go too deep. But as kind of as Brian said, I'm a bit of an accidental politician. If you were to read my high school yearbook, you'd probably be the kid most likely not to run for anything. So I was very focused on math, science, engineering, which is one of the reasons why I ended up going to Caltech. And being a founder was my dream, right? My dream wasn't to become a politician. My dream was to be the next Steve Jobs. And so I admire founders. I am a founder. I think entrepreneurs are the lifeblood of this country. They bring so much incredible value. They take on so much risk. So I think it's incredible what founders do. And so running for any office wasn't really in my plans. I served on the planning commission for some time here in Palo Alto, and I had a lot of people bugging me like, "Oh, great, you should run for city council." I'm like, no, that's not for me. I'm kind of busy doing other things. But what finally made me step up back in 2016 and running for city council was the mayor at the time in Palo Alto was trying to ban software development. So he felt that there was too much traffic and parking issues in Palo Alto. So he thought the way he could solve it is by banning software development in the city. So like Python coding, right? Or Solidity coding. And I thought that was insane. I was running a software as a service company, and we do nothing but software development. So I thought that was insane. So when someone asked me again, "Hey, are you interested in running?" I said, "Okay, I'll run." And I won. And the very first thing I did was legalize software development, because I think innovation is the key to this country's success. So often people are focused in politics, focused on how do I get a bigger chunk of the pie, so to speak. But I think really what we should be focused on is how do we grow the economic pie so that everyone can benefit. And the way we grow the economic pie, as we know as entrepreneurs, is by starting companies, right? By doing innovations. Every entrepreneur knows when we first start off, there's zero. You have nothing, no brand, no money, no team, nothing. And we create something from nothing. And so as entrepreneurs, we're incredibly resourceful. We understand that value can be created, not just reallocated. And so that's kind of my overall philosophy, is to use technology innovation, encourage entrepreneurship, as well as education. You can also improve the productivity of the country by having a more educated populace. So I think that's also really important. I have 2 kids. So education was really important for me, which is one of the reasons why we moved to Palo Alto, is because of the great schools. But the kind of scary thing right now is you look at the education in our country, and overall it's good, but it's uneven. Some places are better than others. But what's worse is, 30 years ago, our country was like #1 in education. Today we're middle of the pack. So I think we need to really try to get back a leadership position in this area. And coming to my congressional run, I think we all know tech is in a bear market right now. I mean, how many of you guys have actually lost money in the stock market or in the crypto market? It's looking pretty depressing right now. Since the beginning of the year, the tech has been kind of on a decline. And part of it, of course, is maybe the economic cycle, but part of it also is bad policy. The investment in R&D, some of the tech lash, right? There's a lot of folks here in Silicon Valley that think innovation will be here in Silicon Valley forever, but we're seeing companies like Tesla move out. We're seeing Oracle move out. We saw HP move out. And you look at where the next great startups starting, fewer and fewer are in Silicon Valley. And some of the policies that are being put in place make it tougher and tougher to start companies. So I happen to be in the crypto space right now, and I know a lot of founders who are moving to Dubai, moving to the Bahamas, moving to other places to create their company. And to me, I think we want the innovation in our country. We want the best and brightest people to be here. And so, I think that really what we should focus on is innovation, not inflation, because so much of what's been happening right now is there's been a ton of printing of money, but it's not really how you create value. And so kind of as was mentioned earlier, my platform is really focusing on using innovation. So my slogan for the campaign is legislator for the digital age. So that's kind of some of my motivation for running for Congress. But the other part is something that was mentioned earlier, which is representation. So in Congress, we're only 3% of the population, we only make up 3% of Congress, even though we're like 7%, or as Brian mentioned, in some places like in Santa Clara County, we're like 40%, 40% Asian. And yet there's not representation. And I'm not sure if you guys remember the shooting last year of those 6 Asian American women. And you saw that spokesperson stand up and say, oh, this is not a hate crime. This is just a coincidence. The guy was just having a bad day. We all know that, you know, the percentage of Asians in Atlanta is really low. The chance of that happening is extremely, you know, extremely coincidental that something like that happened. So, you know, I think for us, if we're not at the table, we're on the menu, and we need to change that. So, anyways, these are just some thoughts, but I'd love to kind of open up to questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg, for that opening and some context on your views regarding some critical issues. We have a few questions that have been raised, and just going to start with something a little bit more close to home in terms of the actual race, because some people might want to get a little more context. You're running in District 16 for Congress, which is really the heart of Silicon Valley. Can you talk about your competition? I think this is with regard to the other candidates and your winning strategy. Are you too different to quote unquote fit in and speak the language? So I guess, you know, being a non-traditional candidate, I guess this is referencing, you know, kind of how you're going to approach this election.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So just to be clear what District 16 is, so the area got redistricted. It used to be 18, now it's 16. Because one of the reasons is they do this every 10 years. And then California lost population relative to other states. So we lost 1 congressional seat. So every district grew a little bit more. And the district goes from Pacifica at the top all the way down to the Santa Cruz County line, all the way up to like the tip of Redwood City, all the way down to like the Los Gatos, North San Jose area. So it's a pretty big district. So you know, there's actually 8 people running. But one reason why there's 8 people running is because the current incumbent will be 80 this year, and there's a renewed district, and so you know, this is probably the best chance to beat an incumbent at this time. So the first person, she's been in office, incumbent in office for 30 years. I would characterize her as someone that's kind of like a party line Democrat in general. Someone that has, I respect her quite a bit, and she's endorsed me in the past, but I think has lost touch with what's going on. You know, I was talking to her about TikTok and, you know, the fact that Trump was trying to ban it. And I was talking to her about it, I realized that she didn't know what I was talking about. And I was asking her staff, like, what, like, she doesn't know what TikTok is. And she's, oh, she actually doesn't use a smartphone. I'm like, my God, who in it's 2022, who doesn't use a smartphone? And, you know, I look at some of her policies. She's trying to ban recommendation engines. So I do a lot of work in machine learning. Some of you guys might not know what a recommendation engine is, but it's like if you buy something on Amazon, it says, oh, we recommend you buy this. Or if you watch YouTube, they recommend what videos to watch next. Or if you're on TikTok, it shows you what video to watch next. Or so basically, it's a way to sift through millions of different postings or products. And you know, her plan is that we should ban recommendation engines, and I'll go back to chronological or you know, numerical order to find stuff. And with the millions of things on the internet, it's so impractical. So I think that in order for us to do well, in order for us to properly represent Silicon Valley and keep the innovation going, I think we want to embrace technology. Now, not to say that technology doesn't have a problem, but banning it outright is not good. I think net technology has been good. There are 3 Republicans running. I think in this area it's heavily Democratic, so it's super hard for any Republican to win the general, just because there's simply not enough Republicans. It's like 60% Democrat. And then there's two other Democrats running. And one is a new college grad. He just finished UCLA like I think a year and a half ago or so. And then there's another one who's a council member down in Saratoga, and he ran last time. And he's running on a like a Bernie Crat platform. So those are the folks involved in this race.
Okay, so Greg, if I could recap, there's two steps in this upcoming election. One is the general election, which everyone has to vote by June 7th. From there will be a runoff, which will be the top two candidates.
Yeah, actually, no, it's
what
called
I
a
understand-
primary. It's a primary election.
Oh,
So the
primary, sorry.
Yeah, the primary is June 7th,
Yeah.
and then the general is in November.
Okay. So primary, which is all candidates, and then the general, which is essentially the runoff of the top two.
That's right.
Okay, so everybody here, if they're interested in how they can support you, it's really about either you go out and vote if you're within District 16, or you can donate to the campaign if you're either in District 16 or not in District 16. That will also help your candidacy. But essentially, your biggest competition is really up against this incumbent, who is a longtime household name. I mean, I remember her when I was growing up in Palo Alto in high school, and her board, campaign ads were all over, and she's well liked. She's part of the Democratic kind of system, so to speak, but perhaps her views are not fully representative of what are the most pressing issues today. I want to take that question or your answer and go one step further.
Sure.
And going from city council to congressman, many would say is a big jump. I mean, if you're up against an incumbent with 30 years history, that's both a pro and a con. But the fact of the matter is, you're making a leap as well. How confident are you, and what would you do if you were to not win this election this time around?
Yeah, so several questions there. So I'll answer the last one, which is run again. So that's pretty simple. If you look at a lot of people who run for Congress, a lot of them don't win the first time, even including the current incumbent. She ran a couple of times. You look at the neighboring Congressperson Ro Khanna, he ran 3 times before he beat Mike Honda. So it's actually pretty common for that to happen. Although I think we have a really good chance this time. So I think the question is, how do we beat the current incumbent? And that's a really good question, because I think about that a lot. So I think you have to look at where her support is. So a lot of her support has been with Big Pharma. And, I think she's the number 1 recipient of Big Pharma right now. And though she's had things that, as a result, she's been really supporting the banning of generics coming into this country. So when there's like the patents on drugs expire, on medicines expire, a lot of generics are produced in Canada, and she's been banning the importation of that. And so that's kind of angered some of the progressive left, so to speak. And so there's weakness there. And then some people have been looking at her legislative agenda. So she's passed about 4 bills in 30 years, so not terribly productive. And then she's been pushing for things like amortization of R&D spend. So for startup founders, that's kind of killer. So let's say I have $1 million in revenue and I have $1 million expenses. You have to amortize that over 5 years. And that means that the first year you have $800,000 of taxes that you have to pay, even though you really have no income. So there's a lot of kind of anti-tech, anti-entrepreneurial policies. So that's caused some weakness. So our campaign, we have fairly decent backing from the tech industry. I'm able to canvass like heck because it's not a problem for me to walk door to door, but for her, definitely. I mean, I think you probably remember Brian. She pretty much all of us stood on a park bench when we at the Stop Asian Hate rally, but she couldn't even stand up on a park bench. So that gives you some reference as to what her current physical capabilities are. So I think that right now we're kind of in dire straits. If you look at the tech industry, there's a lot of storm clouds. So I think we need someone that understands innovation, understands how do we improve the economic situation for everyone, and we need some real action, because I think 4 bills in 30 years is not good. It's one of the lowest productivities out of any congressperson. And so in terms of step up from like city council, so I think for Asian Americans, that's actually, Asian American politicians tend to be very incremental, like they tend to go step by step by step, right? But if you look at other ethnicities, like the person running in our area right now, he's finished UCLA like a year and a half, 2 years ago, you know, African American, running for Congress, no elected office at all. So I think it's it depends, right, in terms of how much of a step is it.
Mm-hmm. Got to sort of believe in something and just go for it. But at the same time, knowing that you have some experience already locally, understand the constituency, that kind of gives you a foundation to work from. Okay, thank you, Greg. And let's kind of shift a little bit to another topic that I think a lot of people are interested in hearing about, which is Web3. And people say you are crypto friendly. Talk to us a little bit about how important a role legislation plays in promoting innovation, particularly around an area that is still new and emerging. And what are some things that you'd want your constituents to know and understand about how you're going to represent this issue to ensure that there is this both promoting innovation, but at the same time, a lot of people are, there's a backlash also at the same time against tech and kind of the dynamics it's creating in the community. So maybe you could address that briefly.
Sure. So this is actually one of my motivators. So in the infrastructure bill, I'm not sure if a lot of people followed it, but in the infrastructure bill, which had some good programs in there, it had this really strong anti-crypto provision. And basically what it did was it made everyone in crypto a broker. And so you have these incredible disclosure requirements where you have to issue 1099s, get people's real name, real address, real social security number, which in the crypto world is possible to do. And so you have this law that you can't comply with, and it threatens to shut down the crypto industry in our country. And for me, I look at crypto Web3 as kind of like where the internet was in 1995. I think it's just emerging. And I think what we should be doing is trying to support this technology versus trying to shut it down. What I really like about Web3, and if you guys don't know what Web3 is, it's this idea of ownership. So Web 1 is kind of like Yahoo, right? Basically read only. Web 2 is kind of like the social media stuff where there's user-generated content, so it's like read and write. And then Web 3 is like read, write, and own. And what I mean by ownership is that you have these tokens that kind of represent ownership, and so there's more alignment. So you can imagine that instead of the data being owned by, let's say, Facebook or Yahoo or Twitter, the data is portable. It's owned by the user, and there's also incentivization through the token, so that there's more alignment to more alignment from the creators of these technologies to the end user, to customers. So it has this incredible potential value to the economy. And so when I saw that Congress was cramping down on crypto, to me it just didn't make sense. We should embrace this technology because I think it has a potential to really improve the economic efficiency of this country. It has potential to create softer stacks that are easier to build. So there's a lot of goodness around this kind of technology. If you look at the U.S. economy, about 10 to 20% of the U.S. economy goes towards the traditional finance industry. And if you look at what the finance industry is essentially doing, it's basically moving numbers on a spreadsheet. So it's a pretty heavy load for what they're doing. And with crypto, since so much of it's in software, especially this idea of decentralized finance, you can greatly increase the efficiency. So I feel that we should be embracing this new technology. Not to say it doesn't have faults, that shouldn't be regulated, but I think to actually clamp down on it and to prevent it from growing doesn't make a lot of sense. So if full disclosure, I'm kind of, I pivoted my company from being kind of in the retail space to more the crypto space, and so I just think that to kind of throw rocks in the road in front of new technology just doesn't make sense. So that's one of the big reasons why I'm running is to basically make crypto legal or keep it legal.
Yeah, great. No, thank you for sharing that, Greg. And I think it's probably an issue on many people's minds that are deep in the tech industry in the Valley. But I want to kind of step back a little bit because you're right. Sometimes a lot of the jargon, a lot of the tech talk doesn't always resonate with everyone in the Valley. I mean, you cover both Palo Alto to Redwood City, but also out towards places like Half Moon Bay, right? And you're so it's a pretty diverse group. But at the same time, you know, there's issues that are facing people who aren't in tech, but you know, things like this anti-Asian hate crime issue. You know, how do you look at that movement? You know, talk a little bit about, you know, why you feel strongly about this. Some people have asked, and, you know, given your own family background and heritage, you know, what are the chances of something like the internment camps that the Japanese Americans had to face in World War II? Is you know, are we at risk of that sort of, you know, discrimination happening because of all the fear around this U.S.-China relationship? Just like to get your thoughts on that, and you know, why this is such an important issue to tackle, particularly for a community as diverse as the Valley.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, you know, just a little background on my family. So, you know, my great grandfather, my dad, my grandfather, all were put in the Japanese internment camps during World War II. They had a wholesale food business, and they lost that. My grandfather died of tuberculosis in the camp, never made it out. My dad was only 6 at the time. Then after the war, you know, if you were Japanese American in California, it was like really bad news because everyone knew someone that died in the Pacific. And my dad would tell me stories about just walking to school, he would get beaten up just for being Japanese. And in fact, it got so bad at one time that he ended up in a hospital, and he decided to drop out of high school as a result. So not a good situation. And when I ran for city council, I went to my dad because, you know, my dad supported Obama and Hillary, and, you know, donated to their campaigns, and I needed to raise money for my campaign. So I said, "Oh, hey, Dad, you know, running for city council, can you donate to my campaign?" And my dad was like, "No, I don't think Asians should be in politics." He said, "I think you should keep your head down, your mouth shut, you know, just work hard." And because he told me that what happened was during World War II, if you were a Japanese American leader, you didn't just get put into a internment camp, you actually got put into solitary. So they rounded up everyone ahead of time. And my dad was saying, like, "Hey, if you got elected, you know, you'll be the first person they round up." And I'm like, "Dad, this is Palo Alto. This is one of the most liberal cities in the country, right? This would never happen." And this is the very reason why we need to step up, because, you know, I think Asian Americans, we do really well in you know, entrepreneurship and venture capital and in medicine and so many other really tough areas. But in politics, we really suck wind, right? In media, we suck wind, right? We don't do well in those areas. And as we found out during World War II, if you're not, as I said earlier, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And the Japanese Americans were definitely on the menu, right? They lost everything. It was a fire sale. And so I don't agree with my dad's idea of we should just kind of step back. He kind of feels like we're guests in this country. And I feel that, you know, my great grandfather came here in 1880. Like, how long do we have to be here to not be guests in this country? So I think we need to push back against it. And then when I told my dad that I was going to run for U.S. Congress, he's like, "Greg, look, if you're going to stay in politics, you need to move to Hawaii because Asians aren't liked in California." I was like, "Oh my God, what a bad attitude."
Move to where?
Hawaii.
Where did he say? Oh, Hawaii.
He said,
okay.
He said that Asians aren't liked in California. I'm like, "God, that's such a bad attitude." But you know, that's how some people think. And you know, I remember you know, during all those anti-Asian hate crimes, you know, if you look at the prosecution rate of anti-Asian hate crimes, it's much lower for Asian Americans. I mean, hate crimes in general is much lower for Asian Americans than let's say Jewish Americans or African Americans. We have the lowest prosecution rate. And I remember talking to the current incumbent, if she could support, there's a legislation from Grace Ming in New York City to try to make it easier to prosecute hate crimes against Asian Americans, and she would not support. And so I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to be running against you, right? So I think it's important. I think this is really important because, without proper representation, I mean, I think there's a view that Asian Americans have done well, so we don't, we're okay, right? But I think so often we're like the doormat everyone walks on, right? If as a group we commit relatively few crimes. As a group, we work extremely hard, and we really focus on education, so we do decently economically. But it doesn't mean that we should be treated as second-class citizens. It doesn't mean that we should have less rights than others. It doesn't mean that when there's a crime committed against the Asian American that we should get less. I was talking to a family that attended. I attended, and Bing and I actually did a Stop Asian Hate rally, but I attended a lot of them, like 20 of them. And I met this family, and they're Thai Americans. Their grandfather got pushed to the ground, basically tackled to the ground. He hit his head and died. And the perpetrator went back to his car, got his phone, and started making a TikTok video out of it, right? Laughing at this guy who's bleeding through the head. And the DA was going to drop the case, right? The DA thought that, it was just an accident, that, despite the fact that the guy who took out his phone making a TikTok video out of it, this guy's first offense, and no big deal. And I'm like, oh my God. So, I helped them rally people to protest in front of the DA's office. And only after were people picketing out the DA's office, the guy said, oh, okay, well, I guess we will prosecute. But why, as Asian Americans, do we get second fiddle? It doesn't make sense. I mean, we should have the same rights as everyone else, right? I realize that some of us have done well economically, but it doesn't mean that we don't have rights, that, we don't grieve when someone gets killed, right? That when we want justice, just like everyone else. I think we deserve that.
So Greg, I mean, those are so powerful words. And I think some of the incidents you're talking about probably affect us in the same way that you've described. But at the same time, there is this perception of, particularly, and I'll venture to say amongst the East Asian community, in particular, that you should keep your head down and don't rock the boat. Yeah. In my short stint in politics in San Francisco, I thought one day I would come back and try and do something, but I got stuck out here in Asia. But I have such admiration for people like yourself that are taking the baton and trying to stand up and voice these things. What gives you the courage to do that and the drive? I think part of it might relate to what you talked about in your family heritage, but also at some point you just can't take any more of this and you need to stand up. But how do you muster the courage to do this every day? And then how do we mobilize more people to support on these issues so that we have a unified voice and not just one person standing there and speaking out?
It's a good question, Ryan. I as I mentioned, I'm not a natural politician. I wasn't running for student council in high school. That wasn't my thing. But the reason I got involved is because I'm very purpose driven, right? So I got involved in city council because, heck, I want software legalized in Palo Alto. That's literally my singular purpose. Eventually I did other things as well, but that was like my motivation. And I think if you look at people who get involved in politics, there's two types of people. There's some people who want to get involved because they like the limelight, they like, they want to look important or feel powerful. And then there's people like me who want to get things done, like that have particular issues that I want to get done. And so it's always been like that. It all started when I was, before I bought a condo in Mountain View, and it was on the 3rd floor, and the laundry units are on the 1st floor. And so I had to walk down, a couple of flights to do laundry. And so I went to the HOA and asked them, hey, can I get a laundry unit in my unit? And they're like, nope, can't do it. But there was an opening to be treasurer. And so I volunteered to be treasurer. And as they got to know me, then, oh, putting a laundry in the units is a great idea. So I got approval for it, and I realized, and that's when I first realized, oh, even though this is like HOA politics, this politics is actually kind of important, right? Because you can sit there and complain about something, or you can get involved and do something. So that's where I kind of switched from, oh, politics is from someone else, to like, oh, actually I should get involved because I could change something. So then when I moved to Palo Alto, I lived on a busy cut-through street, and I was worried about my kids getting run over. There was this little kids at the time, and so I was able to get traffic and calming things in there, and a residential permanent parking program. So I was really trying to improve my neighborhood. And then I also wanted to live near kind of like downtown area. So Cal Ave was my kind of downtown area, and it wasn't doing that well. So on the planning commission, I really made it more vibrant. So that was kind of like my main mission there. And so everything I've done, it's always been kind of more purpose driven. It wasn't just to serve for the purpose of serving, because I think there are people like that. And so for me, for Congress, I feel really strongly about Asian representation, of having equal rights as everyone else. I'm not saying we should get an advantage, but we should have equal rights. And I also feel really strongly about technology. I think there's people out there who fear technology, who think technology is evil, or all this techlash stuff. But I think entrepreneurship, technology is how we make, as I said, the economic pie bigger for everyone. And so we want to, I think we need to change that discourse right now that's happening right now, because among a lot of our political officials, tech is viewed as a bit of an evil thing, right? That it's
Sure.
it's something to be feared. But so I have a kind of a purpose right now. And
Okay.
but in terms of the other question you asked is, how do we build a bench? And I think, as kids, as Asian American kids, we're kind of encouraged to focus on math and science and maybe law, right? But not politics, right? And not media. But those are two areas which are very important to this country, and they shape public opinion, and they decide incredibly important things to people. But I think we need more Asian Americans thinking about how to get involved in those areas. And so one thing I've done is I've had a lot of interns, and I try to get a lot of Asian American interns. And I can tell you some of my proudest moments is when I corrupt some of these Asian American kids to change from engineering into poli-sci politics. And like some parents are like, oh, how come you should take my kid who was going to be an engineer and now he's going to be a poli-sci major, or he's going to, he wants to run for office one day. But I think that's what we need, because politicians set the rules, right? It's incredibly important.
Yeah.
If the rules are stacked against you, it's not a good situation. So I think when I talked to my dad about this, I told him, look, if there were Asian American politicians during World War II, you couldn't have rounded up 120,000 Japanese American. You couldn't basically confiscate all their property. You couldn't have done that, right? Because there would have been a big protest. But because at that time there was no one in office, essentially we could get run over. And we need to be in office to prevent us from getting run over.
Great. So look, I just want to pause here and say to all those who are on this call, especially those who are civic minded or have, care about issues, I think you serve as a shining example of how you can both be successful in business and as an entrepreneur, but also contribute to your community. And it's really up to all of us as individuals to do what we can to be a part of our communities, have a voice, and also impact those around us in positive ways, because then people start to attribute a face or a more constructive perception to those that they might not understand, namely being maybe Asian Americans who have been less active in that area. And so let's take that as a call to action. I want to, again, zoom out a bit, because although Asian Americans, from our perspective, these issues are important, as a congressman, you need to represent the entire community. And one of the big issues facing California today is the expensive living environment that people have to cope with, so much that the fact that they're leaving the state. The cost of living has skyrocketed. As a congressman for probably one of the most expensive areas in the whole country and world, for that matter, what kind of what kind of approach are you going to take to this issue so that people can actually afford to live in places like Palo Alto?
Yeah, it's a good question. So housing is a bit of a local issue. For my city council campaign, affordable housing was kind of a very important topic. And locally, I think the price of housing is driven by two things. One is inflation. So we have incredible inflation right now. And so you get asset inflation. Everything, all assets kind of rise in price. And it's great for the people that own the assets, but it's not great for the young professionals starting out. But the second thing is incredibly restricted zoning, but that's a kind of local control issue. I think there's a third factor also, which is if you look at the average American family, it's been getting smaller, right? So there used to be a lot more kids in American families, and now they're smaller and smaller and smaller. But if you look at the housing sizes, they've been getting bigger. So it's kind of a confluence of those three things that have really made housing incredibly unaffordable in the Bay Area. And it's a little bit scary because, in combination with expensive housing, you also see this flight of innovation leaving, right? Tesla used to be headquarters in Palo Alto, now they're going to Texas. You saw HP move out, you saw Oracle moving out. So you see this kind of flight of talent. I know a lot of venture capitalists have moved out. You look at some of the hot startups and all coming out of Austin or Miami. And I think there's so many people, my colleagues on city council as well, that take innovation for granted. But I could tell you what we have here in Silicon Valley is special. It's something that so many other people in the world want to be the Silicon Valley of whatever. And so I think we need to nourish it. I worry about us becoming like Detroit one day. Detroit back in the 50s and 60s was the place to be. It was the go-to place. The best and brightest of people went there. If you talk to people in the 60s in Detroit seemed unassailable, right? It seemed like it would always be like that. But look at Detroit today, right? It's a shadow of itself. People give away houses. Now, Detroit suffered from imports, right? From Japanese imports, and the auto industry took a big stumble. Silicon Valley is also facing big competition, right? You look at Shenzhen. So I used to have an office in Shenzhen. I went there every quarter, and look at the innovation that's happening. So I think we can't take it for granted. I think that's why I think we need to foster it. I mean, there are people who are talking about, there's politicians who are talking about taxing unrealized capital gains, right? So you imagine as a founder, right, or as a venture capitalist, you're paying tax on, let's say, a Series A company that raised, 50 million pre-money valuation. You have to be taxed on that, right? Like capital gains tax. Or as a founder, can you imagine that? Can you imagine how stifling that is to innovation in the formation of companies? There's also this kind of clamp down on immigration, right? Especially on H-1B visas. I think we want the best and brightest people to be here. But I think the problem is, as an entrepreneur, especially as someone who kind of grew up really, really poor, you learn to be very resourceful. And that's something which unfortunately a lot of politicians don't really think about, right? They think that you need to have a lot of money, right? Whether it's to run a campaign or whether it's to run a government. But as entrepreneurs, we know that you can do a lot with very little. And so that's something that I really think about and try to strive. I try to be, very efficient with what I have, whether it's on city council or the campaign. But I think that's how we make more things happen is being resourceful.
Yeah, great. Well, I know we're coming on the hour here. I just want to get maybe one or two more questions, unless there are those who want to stay on a bit longer as well. That's okay. I think Greg has a little extra time. But there's a question, again, more of a general community issue, and this might relate to local government, but obviously you're at local government now, and you do have an opinion on this. It's safety, community safety, criminal activity. I mean, some of the stuff that's happening within Palo Alto and neighboring areas is unprecedented in terms of, even looting rise of crime. This is symptomatic maybe of a larger, sort of nationwide issue as well. Many factors. But, as someone who's representing, say, District 16, what would you do to address this? Because it is something that affects all of us.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I can tell you kind of a personal anecdote. So my son's classmate was crossing University Avenue, just one block north of the Apple store. And some homeless woman jumped on her back, slit her throat, and stabbed her like, I don't know, 20 times. And this is Palo Alto, right? This is not East Palo Alto. This isn't, Detroit, right? And I think the fundamental function of a government is safety. Okay, so people need to feel safe, right? I walk around Shenzhen, I see little kids, 5 years old, running around, right? Unescorted, right? And like, we need to have a safe place. That goes without question. So how do we do that? So what happened here in Palo Alto is there's a reluctance to enforce laws against homeless people because there's a feeling of it's mean-spirited. And I myself was poor at one point, and I sympathize with that. But this woman had a warrant for her arrest for 6 months. She tried to kill her infant, and so there was an active warrant. And when there's a warrant for attempted murder, I don't care if you're homeless or not, you need to be arrested. I believe that if there's a law, you need to enforce the law because people need to feel safe. And I know there's been a big push to defund the police, and I kind of understand some of that. I remember my dad when he got my dad actually used to work for the police department, the police and fire department in LA. He wasn't a police officer; he was a mechanic, so he fixed the helicopters that they rode in. But I remember my dad used to get pulled over by the police, and he used to just be totally scared, right? And because there's also driving while Asian, right? Sometimes you get pulled over for no good reason, just because you're Asian, and so, but I think that we need to enforce the law. We need to make sure that people are safe, and we also need to make sure that police are, they're not abusing the power. Because I also saw some of that as well. In Palo Alto, there was some incidents of police brutality. So we don't want that either. But it doesn't mean that we can't keep the public safe. And it doesn't mean that we should defund the police. And it doesn't mean that we should, like there's Stanford shopping mall. Every week it gets robbed. Okay, so there's like these flash robberies that happen where people go to a store and in about 30 seconds flat, I'm not exaggerating, about 30 seconds flat, they all run out with something. And there's a limit where it has to be over $950. So you see people breaking these stores and they rob the store and they walk out like no mask, not running, there's pushing a shop cart out the door as if they're shopping, and it's destroying our retail, right? It's destroying law and order in our community, and especially for the Asian American community. We're taught as kids to respect our elders, and we should respect our elders. But the people getting beaten up are our elders, right? A lot of Asian Americans are we tend to be smaller in stature. We tend to we try not to be that aggressive, and so like a lot of Asian American elders are getting pounded upon, and that's not right. So I think so on a local level, what I've done is I've made safety a priority, and I've also restored funding to our police department, and I've been pushing really hard to enforce the laws that we have, because you shouldn't allow someone that's this woman who almost killed my son's classmate. She should have been sitting on the sidewalks of Palo Alto for 6 months before she got arrested. She almost killed someone. That's just simply bad policy. On a federal level, I think what we need to do is, I think we need to, so people think that police brutality and enforcing law are somehow mutually, having the police behave properly and enforcing law is mutually exclusive, and it's not. You could do both. And so in Palo Alto, I served on an ad hoc committee to look at how do we make sure that our police are not abusing the power, but are also being effective. And so we can do that. We can utilize technology. So one of the things I've been pushing for is this thing called license plate readers. And so it's been very effective. Atherton's done it, Danville's done it. And because we're having a lot of these people are stealing catalytic converters. They're, like there's one place on San Antonio Road, Alter Walk, where they got broken in every single week, right, for 2 years straight. So it's really frustrating. And so there's technology you could use to also augment the law enforcement. And there's good policy and procedure we have in place to prevent abuse of power. So I just don't buy the fact that you have to either enforce the law or you have to have abuse of power. It's just simply not true.
Yeah. No, it's an important issue. I think it's on a lot of people's minds. Whether it's in the Bay Area or just nationwide, and it's a difficult challenge to balance everything. But Greg, this has been really great in terms of getting to know you, your position on issues. I think everyone that's been with us has a better understanding of your how you look at these different topics. I want to just kind of introduce Bing Wei, who is your campaign manager, just so people kind of know her role, and also give you a chance to kind of wrap up in terms of what is it that the participants today can do to help support you in your campaign as we move forward. Again, maybe you guys can also reemphasize what are the key dates that we should be aware of, the importance of voting in this local election if they are locally based, etc. You want to say a few things, and Greg, you can wrap up.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm very grateful, Brian Lake, for Heister's support, and then Brian all the way from Shanghai, which is my hometown too. I'm really glad to see some friends over here, Mia Hong and Xi. We need to catch up very soon. I'm honored to be serving this role, and campaign manager is like the CEO for the campaign, but also manage candidate. So it was through the Stop Asian Hate rally we did together, which Brian attended last May. I started to work with Greg on the campaign, and I feel we can make a good team. So what we need most right now is three things. One is primary is in our alley already, and most people, if you're registered, you already got a ballot. So the deadline is June 7th. So we need your votes. If you're in the district, most of them, from what I can see, probably are. And also we need a donation. So if we mail out one postcard to your mail, it's $1 each with the cost of inflation, which we just talked about. So we have 760,000 voters. So one mailer will cost us $760,000. That's why the campaign monies go. And we're also running these video, which we are going to go TV ads. If you can share the video, which is broadcast earlier, that would really appreciate that. And there's also donation link you can do, and for both for Heister and for us. And also, finally, we need the volunteers, interns, if your children politically activated or even civically activated. We have, over 70, 80 interns and 20 something volunteers. So we have a big team, 100 people. We still need more people to help us, especially social media. If you know influencers who can pass on this video we just produced, that'd be fantastic. Thanks ever so much. I think Greg can do your closing.
Sure. Well, thank you, Bing. Again, thank you, Brian, for helping moderate, and Lake for making all this happen. Thank you, Heista, and all the attendees. I think the most important thing to take from this is to get involved. I think, unfortunately, Asian Americans, we tend not to be that involved in politics, and then until later in life, I wasn't that involved myself either. But it makes a big difference, and change is possible. We can make things a bit more fair. We can make things more efficient. We can have a better economic output for everyone. And the key to that is really to get involved. And it could be as simple as being said, just register to vote. That could be huge. It could be just sharing a post that we have. So if you can follow our Twitter, our Facebook page, our TikTok page, whatever it is, that's awesome. If you could like and share it, that's still very helpful. If you know friends in the area, you could send them an email with a link to our video or our website. That would be great. Or like what Brian's done or Lake's done, like you could host also a chance for me to meet people, because direct candidate exposure is really helpful in terms of getting a vote. And so we need scalable ways. So Zoom sessions like this are incredibly helpful. And also if you guys have ideas, we have our policy page, but I'm really into, I'm not that dogmatic. I really try to take the best ideas and make them happen. And so I'm always looking for feedback. So if you have ideas, suggestions on how things could be better, let me know. That's the other thing that's really important. So I think I see a lot of really smart people on this call. So I would also love to learn from the best. So I'm open to ideas. And no matter what, like I said, stay involved. It's so important. I think, so often the people in politics are people who are like professional politicians. But what we need are more people who are tech savvy, more people who have business experience, people who are practical. And so, hopefully maybe one day, you guys will get involved in some ways, whether it's running for office or getting involved in a campaign, or getting your kids involved in a campaign. Like being said, I think that's also great because I think we need to build a pipeline for the next generation. But I've realized in life that getting involved is so important, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing it. Sometimes my wife asks me, why do you do this stuff? Because politics really doesn't pay. I can tell you on city council, my paycheck is $0 at the end of every month, so you don't do it for the money. But I look at where I came from. Where I came from, I remember there were days I was hungry, and now I live in Palo Alto, right? And I feel incredibly fortunate and blessed, and I feel it's time to give back and to make sure that our world is a better place than I found it. And so I hope that you guys could get involved, and really appreciate everyone's time. On a Thursday evening, spending time to hear me talk and interact. I really appreciate it.
Greg, if I could say, I think you're the most non-politician politician I've met. So take that as a compliment.
Thank you.
And I think many would feel the same. I want to just, before we wrap up, pass this to Lake for any final comments as we reach the end.
Yeah, well, first of all, this is a fantastic talk. Thank you, Greg and Brian, to really give us the inspiration. I think it really reminds us again why go back to the soul of HISTA is that we really want to create a community that share the inspiration and share the empowerment. And we should not just be a siloed Asian communities here and there. That's also a reason that HISTA this year annual conference theme is unity, because we need to be together and do more. So, go back and to what Greg shared today. I think there is very clear reason that why we should care about politics and why should we get involved. And what will be really helpful also, I think this is for Greg and Bing, is that if you can share more how, right? So we understand a donation, we're gonna vote, but I think some of us probably still need a README document. So this is the day, this is how you're gonna vote. Many of us are familiar with presidential election, but I would say much smaller percentage are intimately familiar with how to vote for congressman, right? So on your website, or just give the people who a little more detailed instructions, and we can actually get people who have never voted to vote. And so that was my last suggestion. And then one last thing is I want to thank everyone who spent Thursday afternoon here, and I hope I'll see more of you, not only at the voting side, but also see more of you get involved and then bring more inspiration and empowerment to our community. So thank you all for being here tonight. Have a good night.
Yeah, I echo that. This is our time. We should all come out to vote and come out to get engaged. I really echo what Lake said.
Yeah, get your parents, get your votable age kids, cousins, right? To talk to them and have them join us.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right,
well, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening and good luck, Greg. rooting
Thank you,
for
Brian. Thank you, Lake. Thank you, everyone,
Okay.
for supporting. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
and there's a couple of people just donated. Thanks so much. And the maximum amount for per person per election is 2,900. But every dollar counts, even $5, $10. We really appreciate. Just show your hearts really here for us. That'd be fantastic.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Oh, by the
Okay.
way, this has been recorded. So if you want to share this with your friends, so we have a channel on YouTube, Heista channel, and then you type in Hua Yuan Science and Technology Association, then will show up. If you just put in Heista, you're gonna get a band, music band. So that's not us. Okay. All right. Have a good one, and then we're gonna follow up with an email where we're gonna try to send every attendees to capture the YouTube link that for this talk and also the donation information as well. Okay. Have a good night.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye.